Code Explained says hi. Today we're going to create the snake game using JavaScript. You can go and click on the link in the description to head over my repo on GitHub, and there you will find the full code for our game, and also the starter template that you need to download if you want to follow along with me in this tutorial. You can also click on this link here to play the game. So our game here shows the score, the highest score. This is the food and this is the snake. You can see that the game doesn't start by default, so to start the game you must press one of the arrow keys here. And then you can move the snake around and eat the food. The snake increments in length and the score also. If I hit the wall, it shows game over, and we show here the current score and the highest score. And we have here a button to play again the game. So when we click on that button, we reset everything and the user can play again the game. Now what's special about this game is that I have fixed one of the known issues about the snake movement. Now I'm gonna go back to the repo here. I'm gonna go and click on code, download zip, and once downloaded, I'm just gonna open the zip file, and then I'm going to grab just the start template over my desktop here. Then I'm going to rename this to snake.js, and then I'm going to open VS Code and the browser. And now I'm gonna go and open the folder that we have on the desktop, which is our start template. Now if we look into the files, the game.js is empty, just have this comment here. The index HTML is already typed in, the style.css also. So in the index.html we have linked our style.css file, and then we have created a container which has this canvas. This is where our game will be displayed, and this is a div with the class name score to show the current score, to show the highest score, and this is the game over. So this is what we show when the game is over. So we added this hide class name here, and this hide class name simply is having a property called visibility that is set to hidden. So whenever I add this class name to any of the elements, it's gonna hide that element. Now inside the game over screen, we have this message, game over. We show the current score and we show the high score. And also we have this button here, play again, to play the game. Now all we need to do now is to go in our game.js and start coding the game. Now if you want to well understand the code or the logic behind this game here, you can go and watch my previous video that you're going to find here. And in that video I made sure that every beginner out there understand well what's going on behind the logic of creating the game in JavaScript. Well, without wasting time, let's start typing the code for our game. And now the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to go and go live. So I'm going to run a live preview of our project. So you can see here that we have a blank page with a black background. So let's show our canvas by adding a border. So I'm going to select the canvas first. So I'm going to use the const and set it equal to document.getElement by ID, and then I'm going to use canvas. Now I'm going to go and add a border to canvas. So I'm going to use canvas.style.border, and then I'm going to set this to 1 pixel, solid, and in a white color. Now you can see our canvas here. Now what I need to do is I'm going to create a loop for our game, because there is no game without a loop. So I'm going to create some game vars here, game variables, and I will create a const called FPS. So that's how many frames I want to draw per second. So I want to draw 15, so this is 15 frames per second. So what I'm going to do then is I'm going to create my loop here. So I'm going to create a function frame, and this function here is what I want to use to draw everything to the canvas. So that's the function that I want to use to draw the snake, the food, the board, and also to move the snake. So, and this function here must be called 15 times every 1 second. So that's going to be done using set interval, and then I'm going to pass in the frame, so without the parentheses here. So I don't want to call the function. Set interval is going to call the function here, so I just need to like pass the function definition to my set interval function. So then I want to give it some time, which is our FPS here. So how many times you want to call frame? I want to call frame every 1000 by 15, which means 15 times by 1 second. So I'm going here now to just like console log test, and then if I go and open the console, you can see now the test is being like console logged to my console. So what I want to go now is I'm gonna go here and check F at the end here, F hit wall. So F the snake has hit the wall or hit itself, or the snake hit itself. I want to go and show the game over screen by using a function called game over. But before that, I want to stop this loop here. So I want to stop set interval from calling my frame function. So how to do that? First, I need to create a variable called like loop or game loop. I'm going to call it game loop here, game loop, and then I must assign this what set interval here returns to game loop variable. Now I can go and access game loop from wherever I want, or from wherever I want in my code, because now let game loop here is a global variable. So now I'm going to use a clear interval, set interval system that used to like stop or clear the interval as it says here. So I'm going to pass game loop now here, and now whenever it's a game over or the snake hit wall or hit self, we stop the game. And if we want to run again the game, if we want to restart the game, we just need to use set interval again. Now you can see here in the console I have this hit wall is not undefined error because it's not yet, we didn't yet create these functions here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go and comment this out for now, and then I want also here inside my function frame, I want also to draw the board, and I also want to draw the food, and then I also want to draw the snake, but I first need to move the snake and then draw the snake in the last updated position. So I also need to render the score, and that's all I need for our function. Now if I save, we can get this error again of draw function is not defined. So I'm just gonna go and comment this out, and now I'm going to focus on making the code or creating the code for our draw board function. So I'm just gonna go here and add a comment draw board, and then create a function called draw board. And now I just need to go and use one of the methods that are given by our drawing context. But first I need to get that context here. So I'm going to use context equals canvas.get context, And because we're doing just 2D here, I'm just gonna pass in 2D. If you are doing like a three-dimensional game, you must use WebGL or experimental WebGL. So I'm going here now inside my draw board, and I need to go and use context.fill star. So my board here is a rectangle, and that rectangle must be filled with a color. So that's what fill style means, is the color width you want to fill the rectangle. So I'm going to set this to a board color, and this is going to be a global variable. So I'm going to create here game colors, and I'm going to set this, I'm going to create a board color variable. I'm going to set this equal to the white color here. So this is the white color. Now I'm going to use context.fill rect, and fill rect takes in an x and y and the width and height. So the x position of the board is the top left corner here, this corner here, and that's given, the position is given by 0 for x and 0 for y. And now the width of the board is going to be the same as the width of the canvas, and the height also is going to be the height of the canvas. So why not go in here and like set canvas dimensions, and then use const here. I want to set create a width const that is going to be equal to canvas.width, and also a height that is going to be equal to the canvas height. So now I just need to go and use those variables, width and then height, in here. And now you can see, as soon as I saved, now draw board here is called, and I have just like drawn a rectangle filled with the board color, which is white, and it covers the whole canvas now. Now if I change this color, for example, to 00 here, you can see it turns yellow. Now for the board color is going to be black, so I want to stick with black, so 6 zeros here. So now you can see that I have here a board with a black color. And now it's time to go and draw the food and the snake. So I'm going to start with drawing the snake. Before that, we need a helper function. That's because the draw snake and draw food, or the food and the snake, are both made of squares, which means we don't need to repeat ourselves, and we just need to go and create a helper function that's going to be called draw square, and then this function here is going to be used to draw food and also to draw the snake, because they are both made of squares. So I'm going to create a function draw square, and this function here needs 3 parameters. The first one is x and y, the position of the square, and also the color width I want to fill that square or rectangle. So before drawing that rectangle, I need to change the color fill style to the color width I want to fill the square. And then I need to use context.fill rect, and then I want to pass in the x and y position from here. And then the width and the height of draw square are both going to be equal to 20. So I'm just going to go here to my game variables and then create a const called square size. So square size, and then it's going to be equal to 20. So I'm just going to go and copy this here and use it for the width and also for the height. Now I'm going to hit save. Now let's go and call my draw snake or draw square, sorry. So if I go and draw square here, so let's say I want to draw a square at the top left corner here. So I'm going to say x and y 0, 0. Let's change the color to white. F. Now just look at here. When I save, you can see that the square pops up, so it's get drawn here, but disappears right away. And that's because I draw the square here, and then directly I draw the board on top of it, and I keep drawing the board so we don't see that square anymore. So what I want to do is I want to take this one here and put it inside the frame function. Now if I save, now we can see my square there. Now if I want to move that snake, let's say I want to draw it at 1 pixel here. So you can see here that my square just moved by 1 pixel, but I don't want that in the snake game. Because that's going to lead to a problem. Well, I don't want to discuss that here actually, because I already did in the previous video where I talked about the logic behind the snake game. So I really recommend that you go and watch that if you want to fully understand this. So what I want to do here is I want to multiply the x position by square size. So and also the y position by square size. So now if I call this function here, now you can see that my square here is 1 square far from the left side for the x position and 0 squares from the top. So now what we're doing here, instead of using pixels to draw my squares or food and snake, we're going to be using a unit that we call square size. So now if I, for example, say 10 and then here 2, this means that my square is 10 squares far from left and 2 squares from the top. So now let's go and see if I draw another square like just after this one here, let's say 3 for square size. Now you can see here we have 2 squares, but we can't tell if they are actually 2 squares because we don't have anything that separates them. So let's go and draw a stroke over my rectangles here. But before that, I just need to go and take this from here. So instead of always like repeating ourselves, always using square size, I'm just gonna go and use that inside my function. So now instead of using square here, when I call the function draw square, I'm going to implement that code inside the draw square function. So now if I hit save, we will get the same result. So now let's go and add that stroke we talked about. So I'm going to change again the stroke style to the color of the board. So I want the color of the stroke to match the color of the board. So I'm going to use the board color, which is a black color here. So I'm going now to use context.stroke rect, and this is what we use to draw a square or to draw a stroke. And I'm going to use here the same parameters that I passed to field rect here. So that's how I will make sure that this stroke here is always around my rectangle here. Now if I hit save, you can see that my squares now have a stroke. Now that's it with the draw square. Let's move and draw our snake. And now it's time to go and create and draw the snake. So let's go here and just say snake. And then let's go and create our snake. So the snake is going to be an array. So this array here will have objects, and each of the objects will represent a square. And the square needs an x and y position. So my object here will be having x and y positions properties. Now, if you're coming from the logic part, the first object here is going to be the head of the snake. Now, this one here is going to be the body. And this one here is going to be the tail. So the first element in our snake array is going to be always the head, and the last one is going to be the tail of the snake. So the tail is going to be there, then the body, and then the snake. So the tail here has 0 for x and y position. Then the next square is going to be 1 square from the left and then 0 square from the top. Now you can see here that I don't read this with the unit pixels anymore, because now we're going to use draw square to draw my snake, and draw square is using a new unit called square size here. So instead of reading this with pixels, whenever you find an x and y position in our code, that's going to be in square size per unit. So I'm going to use here, so x is 1 square and y is 0 squares. Now for the last one, which is the head, is going to be 2 squares from the left and 0 squares from the top. Now all I need to do to draw my snake is to loop over my array and draw each of these squares here. So I'm going to create my function draw square snake here, and this doesn't need any parameters, so I just need to go and loop over my snake array using a for each method. I'm going to call each of these elements square, and then I'm going to use my draw square function here. So my draw square function needs an x and y position and a color. So for the x position, it's going to be this square.x, because now this square here is just this object here, the square.x, and then the square.y, and then for the color, just use a white color for now. So if I hit save now, and then uncomment draw snake function here, now you can see my snake draw into the canvas. So we have the tail here, then the body, and then the head. So now what I want to do here is use a different color for the head and the body. So I'm just going to go to the top here where I create my game colors. Then I'm going to use a comma here, then the head color. The head color is going to be, I guess, white. And then the body color is going to be like a gray color, so 999. Now I'm going to hit save. Let's go back to our code here. So how do we know that we're drawing the head? So I'm going to use here an if statement, or actually I'm going to create a constant called color, and I'm going to use a ternary operator to check if it's the head or not. So I'm going to use I, or the index here, let's just call it index, and that's going to be the second parameter passed to our function by the for each. So the index here for the head is going to be 0. So I just need to check if the index is 0. If that's true, I'm going to use the head color. If that's not true, that means it's the body or the tail. It's going to be the body color. So I'm going to hit save now. You can see that it didn't change because I need to pass the color here to my function draw square. So now if I hit save, you can see that the head color is white now and the body is this gray color. And that's it for drawing the snake. Now let's go and draw the food. And now it's time to go and create the food and draw the food. So I'm going to go and create a variable called food, and this will be equal to create food, which is going to be a function. This function will simply return an object with an x position and a y position, just like so. So now let's go and create our function, create food here. So this food will simply go and create like a food object inside, which is going to be having an x property, y property. So of course we need to generate this randomly, but let's just hard code them for now. Now I'm going to return at the end the food position that I have created. Now when I call food, or when I call create food, this food here will receive this object. Now all I need to do is to go and create my function draw food here, and this function will take in no parameters. So I'm just gonna go here and uncomment draw food, and now let's go and use our draw square because the food is just a square. So I'm going to use my food.x and my food.y we just created here. So, and the color is going to be F95 700. I just remember this. So this is our food like drawn in this position here, which is 5 squares from left and 6 squares from top. Now something we need to take in mind whenever we generate the food is that the minimum position for x is going to be 0. So we don't need our food to be drawn outside the canvas. Also the last or the maximum x position is going to be 19 here. The same thing for the y position. The minimum y position is going to be 0 and the maximum position is going to be 19. Now to generate random numbers in JavaScript, we'll use math.random. So I'm just going to go and open the console here. So if I use math.random, math.random will generate numbers between 0 and 1 excluded. So I will get numbers between 0 and 0.999. Now 0 and 0.99, if I multiply 0.999 by 20, this will turn 19.998. Now if I take this number and use math.floor and pass in the maximum value we would get using math.random here multiplied by 20 is going to be 19, which is exactly what we want here. Now all I can do is I just need to take this code here and come here and paste that in here. So instead of this, I'm going to use math.random because I want that random to be generated randomly. The same thing here, I'm going to use just the same code to generate y. Now if I refresh this, it will work just fine, except we have a magic number here. Now why I used 20 in the first place? I used 20 in the first place because 20 is the number of squares I have horizontally, and also 20 is the number of squares I have horizontally or vertically. So here, instead of using this magic number, I'm just going to go and calculate the number of squares or vertical and horizontal squares. So I'm just going to go and create a const called horizontal square, or just sq, equals the width divided by the square size. So if you remember, the width is 400 divided by 20, the square size, this will return 20. The same thing now for vertical squares, it's going to be this time height. Sorry, it's going to be height. And now because the width and the height are both equal to 400, that's why we get 20 for horizontal squares and 20 for vertical squares. So now instead of using this magic number, I'm just going to use horizontal squares and vertical squares for this one here. Now if I hit save, I'm going to get the same result. Now if I keep refreshing this, I must get at the end the food drawn on the snake. So I don't want to do that, I just don't want to waste time. So the food, sometimes when we generate the food randomly, the food will have the same position as the snake. So what we need to do is we need to make sure that whenever we generate the food, it doesn't have the same position as the snake or one of the squares of the snake. So what I want to do here is I'm going to use an if statement and then check if the snake dot sum. So I want to check if some square in the snake does have the same position as the food. So I'm just going to check x position against the food x position, and also the square y position against the food y position here. So now if this is true, what I want to do is I want to go and use the same code to regenerate the food position here. But if I just do it this way here, what if I regenerate the food and it happens to be again having the same position as one of the squares of my snake array? So this means that instead of using an if statement, I need to use a while loop here. So I'm gonna keep generating the food as long as the snake as long as one of the squares in my snake array has the same position as the food object. So I'm going to save this here, and now if I refresh this, or no matter how many times I refresh this, it will never be drawn on the snake. And that's how we can draw and create the food. And now it's time to control our snake, which means we need to use or to add an event listener to the document. So I'm going here just below the snake here, I'm going to add a document that adds an event listener. It's going to be on key up, and then I'm going to run a function called set direction. So I'm going to create that function just below set direction here. It's going to take in the event, the key up event. So the key up here has a code, and I'm going to get that using, so I'm going to call this first new direction. So this is the new direction whenever the user presses one of the keys. The event, that key, is going to be the new direction of the snake. So I'm just going to go and console log that for now, new direction. I'm going to hit save. Let's go and open our console. Now if I press up, it says arrow up, right, arrow down, and arrow left. So now I can control my snake using those directions. And now it's actually the time to move the snake. So we need to go and create our function move snake. And here I'm just going to add a comment that says like key up event listener. So here, this is where I move the snake. So the logic behind moving the snake is simple. So what we need to do is we need to get the head position here. So get head position. And then if we move to the right, what we need to do is we need to get this head position and then calculate the new position of the head and then save it. Then we need to remove the tail and then draw the head on the new position. And by keeping doing that, that's going to make us feel like the snake is moving. So we're going to get the head position first. So I'm going to like say const head equals snake with index 0, because if you remember, the head is given by index 0. Now if I do this here and then get head position and then change head position here, because we want to change the head position to take that head to the new position. If I change this head, that X and Y, this will affect my snake array, because here I didn't create a new head or a new like const. This is just a reference to this one here. So what I need to do is I need just to save this value here to the head, not the reference. So I'm going to use a new object and then use the spread to spread this object here. So now if I spread this object and put it in the new object, now head has this value here, not a reference to that object. Okay, now this is where I want to change the head position based on the direction. First, I will go here to the top and create the variables that I need for the directions here. So I'm going to create a variable called direction or current direction. and I'm going to set to an empty string because I don't want my snake to move when the game starts. So current direction is going to be an empty, and then when the user clicks or presses one of the arrows, then I want to set this current direction to one of these. So for example, right if the arrow right was pressed, and then down if the arrow down was pressed. So now for these directions here, I used this object because I don't want to keep typing these strings in my code. And also whenever I want to change this to some other values, I can just change them here in this one place, not everywhere in my code. So I'm just gonna hit save now, and then I'm gonna go into my move snake. Now to change the head position is simple. So I can use an if statement, or I can use switch. The switch statement, I'm going to check for the current direction. So when the current direction is directions that like right, let's start with right. So if the snake is going to the right, what I want to do with the head position is I just want to change the X position, not the Y position, because the Y position is going to stay the same, but X is going to be incremented by 1 square at a time every frame. So I need here to go and say head.x plus equal 1 square and then break. Now if I want to go to the left here, I'm just gonna go and say left, then I'm going to decrement x by 1 because I want to go to this position here. So I want to decrement this by 1. Then if I want to go up, I need to change the Y position and not the X position. So I want to change here the Y position, and they will need to increment or decrement the Y position by 1 each frame. Then if I want to go to the bottom here, or down, we used down, I guess. We use down. I want to increment the Y position by 1. And that's how I will calculate the new position of the head. Now, all I need to do to give that illusion of the snake is moving is that I need to keep like remove tail and shift new head. So I want to keep like adding a head on the new position, remove the tail and shift the new head, etc. And this will keep moving our snake. It's like taking this square here, put it in here, take this one, put it in here, etc. So remove the tail is going to be snake dot pop. So pop is used to remove the last element in an array, and the last element in our array is the tail. Now the head is going to be snake dot unshift, and unshift here inserts new elements at the start of an array. That's what we need because the start of an array of our array snake is the head. So I'm going to unshift the head, this one here, and then hit save. Now all I need to do is I'm going to go into my add event listener. Instead of just console logging the new direction, I need to go and set the current direction equals to the new direction here, and I'm gonna hit save. Now if I go and press the keys, you can see that nothing's happening because I need to uncomment move snake. So now you can see that my snake here keeps shrinking, and that's because we are running this code here before we change the current direction to any of these directions here. So what we need to do is we need to make sure that the game started before we go and move the snake. So I want to use here an if statement to check if the game started and then return. So this means if the game not started, I will return. This means this will not run. So need to go and create this one here. So game variables, let start, and then this will be false. So game started false by default. I'm gonna hit save. Now you can see that the snake is still there. Now all I need to do here is I'm gonna go to the bottom here to my frame function. Now instead of like creating the loop before the game starts, I'm just gonna go and call frame. This will call frame one time, and this will draw everything on the canvas, but it doesn't like create the loop. So I want to create the loop only when the user clicks or presses one of the keys. So this means I want to check here if the game started or not started, then I shall set game started to true and then initiate my loop here. So this is where I will do it. Now let's go and see. Now if I click or press one of the arrows, you can see that my snake is moving, which is great. Now we have two issues with the movement of the snake. The first one is when I go to the bottom, to the right, or I can go in the opposite direction. The same thing if I go up, I can go down in the opposite direction. So we need to fix this first. And now to fix that issue, we simply need to go and create another const called old direction here. I'm going to set it to current direction. So we simply need to check the old direction before going to the new direction, which means I need to use an if statement here. And then if that's true, then I will go or set new direction to the current direction, then the snake can go into the new direction. So I'm going here to check. So if the user wants to go to directions that left, so if the user wants to go left, I want to check first if the old direction is not right. So if that's true, so if we want to go to left, we need first to check if the old direction is not right. The same thing here, I'm going to use an OR operator here. So same thing, if the new direction is right, and then the old direction is not left, then I can go right. So if this is true, then we don't go and check this one. So we just go and set current direction to new direction. That's how the OR operator works. But if this is false, then we're going to check this one here. Then also I'm going just to copy this. So now if the old direction or the new direction is up, we need to check if the old direction is not down. The same thing here, if the new direction is down, we need to check if the old one is not up. Then I'm going to hit save. Now I'm going to try to go in the opposite direction, and it doesn't go in the opposite direction. And now we fixed that first issue with the movement of the snake. Now let's see what's gonna happen if I go up, then left, then bottom, but fast. So I'm going to press arrow left, then down faster. So let's see what's gonna happen here. Let's try one more time. You can see that the snake went into the opposite direction here. So that's the next issue we need to fix. And now to fix the second issue with the movement of the snake, we need first to know from where that issue came from. So if you think that it's coming from here, that's not the answer, because this code works just fine. The problem is with this FPS here. it's with the set interval. So we're calling frame in a very long time compared to how fast I was to press the left arrow key, then the down arrow key here. So when I press the left key, the set interval didn't call frame yet until I pressed the down key. So the time between left and down key when I pressed them was like very small compared to FPS. So to fix this issue here, what we need to do is that we need to make sure that we consume each pressed key by the user. So when I pressed the left key, I must consume that first before assigning the down key to the current direction and consume it. So to do that, we need to create a queue for our directions. So I'm going to create a directions queue, and it's gonna be an array where I push every pressed key by the user. So whenever I press a key, I'm gonna add it or push it to do my global array here, or variable array. So I'm going to the top here, and then I'm just gonna go and say let equals to an empty array. So now whenever I press a key, it's gonna be pushed first to this array here. So let's show you that. So I'm gonna go here and then console log directions queue. Hit save. Now if I open the console, now if I press any key, you can see that it's been added to my arrow key here, or my directions queue array. So what I want to do here is I want to, on every frame, consume the first here. So this is the first, like the first key pressed, and this is the last one here because we're using push. So on every frame, I want to make sure that I consume one by one. So this one on the first frame, on the second frame, on the third frame, etc. And that's how I make sure that all the pressed or all the directions will be consumed. So I'm just gonna go and remove this console log line here, and now I'm going to go in my move snake function, because in move snake, or the move snake function, is being called on every frame. So I now I am sure that if I consume those directions here, I now will be 100% sure that every direction will be consumed on every frame. So here I'm just gonna go and say like consume the directions. Now I'm going to set current direction here. So now if instead of setting the current direction inside our set direction here, now we first push it to the directions queue, and then we set current directions here to the first element in that array. So then we, based on the current direction, we go to that direction. So to do that, let's first say here directions queue array. So let's say we have arrow left, and then we have arrow down, for example. So now to consume this here, what we want to do, we need to say directions queue, and then with index 0. And then what I want to do is I need to remove this from the array because I consumed it. I don't want to keep it there because on the next frame I want to go to the next one. So this means that I want to consume it and at the same time remove it. So I can do that in 2 lines, but I can also do it in 1 line. So instead of using the square brackets, I'm going to use shift, and shift here removes the first element from an array and returns it, which is exactly what we want. So we're going to remove this and then return it, set to current direction, and then go to that direction. So now if I go and try that in my game here, you can see that we have this weird problem, and that's because if we take a look in the current direction, it's going to be undefined. Why? Because in the first frame we consume a row left, it's going to be removed, right? Then in the second frame we're going to consume a row down, and now on the third frame direction skew is empty. Direction skew that shift will return undefined. So that's when current direction is undefined, we don't go to any direction, we keep popping the tail, and the snake shrinks down to one square. So what we need to do here is we need to make sure if the direction skew is empty or not. If it's empty, then we don't want to consume the directions anymore. If there is any direction, then we want to consume the directions. So I'm going to use here an if statement. So if direction skew dot length, simple as that. So if directions dot length is 0, this means false, and that means direction skew is empty. If it's equal to 1 or more, then 1 or more is going to be true, and we're going to run this line of code here. So I'm going to hit save. Now let's go and try that. And you can see that it works just fine and no more issues with the movement of the snake. And now it's time to eat the food. So the snake will eat the food when the head has the same position as the food here. So if they both have the same X and Y position, it means that the snake has eaten the food. So something I want to show you here, what will happen if I don't remove the tail? So if I keep and shifting the head without removing the tail. So I'm going to hit save. Now let's move our snake here. So you can see that the snake is growing on each frame by one square here. So with this idea, I'm going to use this idea to keep growing our snake whenever it eats the food. So simply what I want to do here, so I'm just going to uncomment this. So I'm going to check here if has eaten food. Of course, if the snake has eaten food, this is a function we created in a moment. So if this happened, I don't want to remove the tail, and that's gonna make our snake bigger by one square. But I still need to draw the food in a new position or generate a new food. So I'm going to use my create food function to generate a new food. But if the snake didn't eat the food, what I want to do is I want to remove the tail. So let's go and create this function here. So I'm just gonna go to the bottom here. Let's say function then has eaten food. It takes in no parameters. So I'm going to get first the head, because that's what I want to check its position against the food position. So it's gonna be given by snake with index 0, and then I will return a condition. So we had that x is equal to food.x, and the head.y is equal to head or food.y. So when these are true, or when this condition here is true, this means that we eat the food, and we create a new food. So the food will be drawn a new position. We don't remove the tail, so this will make our snake bigger. Let's try that. So I'm going to eat the food here. You can see that the snake has grown by one square, again by one square. And now it's time to render the score and the high score. So we need to go to our index.html. So we're going to change this, the inner HTML of our div here with the class score, and the same thing with this one here. So we need to target both these elements. So I'm going to the top here. I'm going to say select elements, and then I'm going to create a const score element, and then I'm going to use document.query selector, then the score class name. I'm just gonna go and duplicate this, so this will be high score element, and this also will be high score. So now I have targeted my elements. Now I'm just gonna go here and then uncomment my render score. Now let's go to just here. I'm just gonna go and say score, and then I'm going to create my function render score. It takes no parameters. Now all I need is to change the score element, that inner HTML, to some backtext here, and I'm going to use this icon here, and then it's going to be the score variable I didn't create yet. So I'm going to use score here, and the idea here is that I'm not gonna go and create a score variable, global variable, and whenever I eat the food I increment that by 1, because I am already doing that. So whenever I eat the food, I increment the snake length with 1 square. So I'm going to use that. So I'm going to use snake that length, because that's going to be incremented by 1 whenever I eat the snake. So no need to go and create a variable, set it to 0, and then keep incrementing score by 1 each time. So I'm going to hit save now. You can see now that the score is set to 3, and that's because the initial snake length is 3, which means we need to subtract that. So I'm going to create a const that is going to be equal, or I'm going to call it initial snake length equals to snake that length. So this will only run when the game starts. So it will always be equal to 3. So it's not going to change. I also made sure that this doesn't change by using const. So now all I need to do is to remove or subtract that initial snake length. Now if I hit save, now you can see it's 0. Now if I go and eat the food, you can see that the score has been incremented by 1. And that's how I increment the score. Now it's time to add some collision detection for our game. So we need to check if the snake has hit itself or hit one of the wall, then we need to stop the game. So I'm just going to go and uncomment this code here, and then comment game over function, because I'm not going to create that yet. So I'm going to create my head wall function, head wall. It's not going to take in any parameters. Now I'm going to check if the head, X and Y position are beyond these walls. So I'm going to get the head first, snake with index 0, and then I'm going to return a condition. So simply I want to check head X against this wall here. So if the head goes beyond this wall, this means that X is less than 0. If it goes beyond this wall here, this means that head that X is greater than 19. So head that X is greater than 19. And because I don't want to use a magic number here, so I'm just going to go and use greater than or equal, then horizontal squares. And then the same thing for head that Y. So I'm going to check if it's less than 0, or if head that Y is greater again than 19, or greater than or equal to vertical squares. So I'm going to hit save. Now if this is true, then we clear the interval. This means the game will stop. So let's check that. So if I hit this wall here, you can see that the game has stopped. If I hit the bottom wall, the same thing. That also worked. If I hit the top wall, it's also game over. And now let's go and check if the snake has hit itself. So I'm just going to go and create my function here. So head self, function head self. So what I need to do is I want to check if this square here, which is the head, has the same position as the rest of the squares in the snake array, which is I'm going to call the snake body. So I'm going to create the snake body here. So I need to get a copy of the snake, not a reference to the snake array. So I'm just going to go and spread again the snake array. So by spreading snake array and then put it in a new array, this makes a copy to the snake array, not a reference, because I need to change snake body. Now snake body now is the whole snake, but I want to make sure that the snake body is only these two squares here, for example. So what I need to do is I'm going to create the head, and then I'm going to use shift, and then if you remember, shift removes the first element, which is the head, from an array and returns it, which means we're going to save it here. So now snake body is the snake without the head. Now all I need to do is I need to go and say snake body, and then check if some of these squares here, I'm going to call it square. So if some of these squares here has the same position as the head, that means that the snake has hit itself. So I'm going to say square.x equals head.x and head or square dot y is equal to head.y. I'm going to hit save. Now this will evaluate either to true or false. True if the snake hit itself, false if it didn't. So I'm going just to return the whole thing. I'm gonna hit save now. I need to make my snake bigger and then hit itself, but I just don't want to waste time, so I'm just gonna go here in my snake array. I'm just gonna keep it bigger myself. Then this is gonna be 3, 4, 5, 6, then 7, then 8, and let's hit save. Now let's try and okay, now you can see that the game stopped because we have a game over. And now it's time to show the game over screen when the snake hit the wall. But first, I will go to the render score here, and I want to make the score a global variable here. So let score, and I'm going to initialize it with 0. And then this is where I calculate the score on every frame. Now, because here I set this to a global variable, because when I get to the game over, I also need to show the score. I need to show the updated score here. So the score here is the same as when it's a game over. So I'm going to use a global variable here, the same thing with the high score. So I'm going to say high score, and then I'm going to set the high score element, which we selected at the top here, if you remember. And I'm going to set it to the same thing here, except it's gonna be high score, and this one's gonna be this icon here. Now if I hit save, we can see the current score and the high score. Now let's go into our frame function. Let's uncomment this and let's go and create our function game over. So function game over, and then the first thing we need to do here is we need to show game over element or screen. So I want to show this here, And this will be shown by removing the hide class name. So I need to actually go and select this. So I'm gonna go and like duplicate that and then say here game over element. Now all I need to do, go back to my game over function. So game over element dot class list dot remove the hide class name. I'm gonna hit save. Now let's bump into a wall and you can see our game over, but we don't see the high score and the score and the high score. So what I need to do here is I first need to go and select game over score, current and high, and then change their inner HTML. So I'm gonna go here and then I'm just gonna select them here because I don't want to make them global variables. Select score and high score elements. So I'm going to create a score element equals, so don't confuse this with the score element here. So actually I'm just gonna go and copy these 2 lines of code. I'm gonna go to my game over here, paste them in here. Now this one's gonna be game over score, I guess. Then this one is gonna be current. The same thing here. This one's gonna be just high. Let's make sure. So game over score, current high. Game over score, current high. Let's hit save. Now let's go and update the score and high score elements. So again, I'm just gonna go and grab the code here. Let's hit save. Now let's bump into a wall. It didn't show that. Let's open our console here. Can access property inner HTML high score element. So high score element here. I need a dot here. Let's now bump into a wall again. Now you can see the game over, the score, current, and the high score. Now let's go and calculate the high score. So I'm going to say high score equals to math.max. So this will return the greatest or the largest value. So I'm going to set score and then the high score as the values passed to max. Now the one that is the biggest value is going to be the new high score. That's simple. Now let's hit save. Let's go and eat the food here. The score now is 2, but the old high score is at 0. Now if I hit the wall, now game over says that we have a high score now of 4 instead of 0, and the current score is 4. Now it's time to go and save this to the local storage. Now to save an item to the local storage, we use setItem method, and to get that item back, we use getItem method. So I'm going to use local storage object, then setItem method, and then I need to give it a key. So whenever I want to get back that item from the local storage, I need to provide that key. So I'm going to call this high score, and then the value I want to save, it's gonna be high score. So every value is in my high score variable. Now I'm going to hit save. Let's go and eat some food. Bump into a wall. Now game over has run. Then we save this to the local storage. Now let's open our console here. Let's go to storage, and then I'm just gonna make this a little bit bigger. So I'm going to go to local storage, and then you can see this high score, it says value 1, just the same thing as here. Now if I refresh, you can see that the high score here says 0, which is not true. It must be 1 when the game started. So this means that when I set high score to 0, I need to get back that item from the local storage. So get item, and then I need to provide the key we used, high score, and then I'm going to hit save. Now you can see it's 1. But let's say what's going to happen if the user has opened the game for the first time. Let's just go and remove this from the local storage. Now if I refresh, you can see that it says null, because this returns null. So we need to make sure that when this returns null, we set high score to 0. So I'm going to use an OR operator here. So if this is null, this is false, then we're going to go and set 0 to high score. I'm going to hit save. Now you can see that it's 0. And if I eat some food, high score now is 2. If I refresh, 2 is still there. And that's it for saving and getting the high score from the local storage. Well, now this is the last part in this tutorial. So we need to make sure that the user can play again the game. So we need to add an event listener to this, a click event. So we need to grab its class name here to target that element. Now let's just go to the top again and then use that class name. I don't need to forget the dot again. So then I'm going to use play again button for the name. Then this is what I want to add a event listener to. Now I'm going to the top here. Let's go and say restart the game. So I'm going to add an event listener to this one here, this button, which is click, and then call a function called restart game. So I'm just going to go and create that function, restart game. Now to restart the game, we need to restart almost every variable, including our snake. So I'm going to say reset snake length and position. So I'm just going to go and grab my snake array. So I started with this snake, so I'm just going to go and reset to the same length or snake. So I don't need to copy length because I don't want to redefine my snake here. So I'm just going to go and paste that in here. Now I'm going to need to reset directions also. So I'm going to set the current direction to an empty string again, and also directions queue to an empty array again. Then I need to hide the game over screen, and that's going to be by game over element that class list that add the hide class name back. Then if you remember, we need to change reset the game started state to false. So the game isn't started yet, so I need to set game started to false again. And now if I go and bump into a wall, then if I click on game over, everything is reset. This one worked, also these, but now you can see that the snake is still in the last position here, which means that we need to call frame, the function frame, to redraw everything again. So I'm going to hit save. Now let's go and bump into a wall, play again. You can see now that everything is reset and I can play again the game. And I guess that's it for our game. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe, and see you in the next tutorial.